St. Augustine is one of the oldest cities in the United States. The St. Augustine Lighthouse that rises at the end of Anastasia Island in St. Augustine was built in 1874 and was one of a long series of lighthouses that have served the city since Francis Drake raided the village in 1586. St. Augustine has become a National Historic Site, attracting thousands of visitors every year. But visitors don't just come for the historical features. St. Augustine's years of service have left the lighthouse with many ghosts and paranormal events, which led Jason Hawes of Ghost Hunters to dub the lighthouse the Mona Lisa of the paranormal sites. An English student at the University of North Florida said the stories they tell are of a historical nature, so they interest visitors who want to know the past and those who focus on horror events. Although not a ghost hunter himself, the student said he saw many strange things in the lighthouse during his visit. He said he saw a dark figure in the tower, a hand that entered through the tower door, and that the furniture moved by itself. He said that something had ripped his hair from his arm in the basement of the janitor's room. He also claimed that something also grabbed him by the ankle while he was walking. Other people who visited the lighthouse claimed to have seen a girl dressed in vintage clothes looking from the lighthouse door or standing near a window upstairs. In 2009, a cell tower technician took a picture of his colleague with a lighthouse in the background. However, upon viewing the image, he could see a girl with a long dress and long hair standing alone and staring out on the upper observation deck. It's not known who the individual is, but many who have visited the lighthouse have said that they've seen her, and have further claimed that she is behind the many mysterious encounters that happen in this building. Another tourist said that while visiting the lighthouse, they could hear faint laughter coming from one of the rooms. However, when the group entered the room, there was no one inside. Interestingly, when the group entered the room, they remarked on how cold it was. It had been a hot day, but for some reason this room was ice cold. They couldn't explain where the laughter was coming from and why this room had the temperature it did. These and more ominous events have made the St. Augustine Lighthouse a popular tourist site for horror enthusiasts. Is Alcatraz haunted? Creepy ruins, abandoned prison, and scary island. It's fair to say that Alcatraz has all the possibilities to become a haunted hotspot. With centuries worth of history, by the early 20th century, Alcatraz was not a place you'd hope to end up at. But is the isolated island really haunted? There are many stories from the island's time as a penitentiary. Supposedly, many prisoners still walk the island, searching for retribution from their mistreatment at the island prison. Punishments at Alcatraz were harsh, and those found breaking rules were stripped naked and forced to be in a cell with no lights, sink, or mattress. To add to this, their only toilet was a hole in the ground. It's believed that many spirits can't move on from their final resting place. The strip cell in particular sees lots of ghostly activity. One particular cell of note is cell 14D, the so-called dreaded cell. The story goes that this cell is the location of where one inmate, after screaming that some kind of a creature was going to end his life, actually passed away. Through the night, the man claimed that something with glowing eyes was after him, and in the morning, the man was found by guards, no longer alive. Modern-day visitors to the cell often state that they suffer from a cold feeling as well as a sudden change in energy upon entering the room. All of the cell blocks of the prison are full of activity. Blocks A and B often see reports of ghostly crying and wailing, perhaps the cries of prisoners who are tied to the island forever. Block C was the subject of much interest when a psychic visited the island and claimed to have come into contact with a spirit named Butcher. Eerily, prison records show that a man named Albie Maldovitz, a hitman who went by the name Butcher, passed away in Block C. The most famous inmate to ever step foot on Alcatraz Island was Al Capone. The gangster spent his last years alive in the high-security prison and eventually passed away from an STI that went untreated. Al Capone was noted to have played banjo with the prison band, often fearing for his own safety if he spent time in the communal prison yard. Capone managed to receive permission to practice in the shower room. Scarily, many people have reported that they have heard banjo playing through the prison walls, specifically coming from the shower room. Even those who are not familiar with Capone or Alcatraz's history have stated that strange banjo music could be heard in the prison, without any identifiable source. Perhaps the ghosts of Alcatraz prison wander the island in the hope that one day they might be released. Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. Burton Agnes Hall is a large mansion located in Yorkshire. It was built by Sir Henry Griffith during the 17th century. The most famous artifact of Burton Agnes Hall is a mysterious skull. It is believed that this is the skull of Anne Griffith, one of the daughters of Sir Henry Griffith. According to the legend, Sir Henry Griffith had 3 daughters. Anne was one of them. One day she was returning from a friend's house when she was attacked by ruffians. They left her severely wounded. Anne was brought to Burton Agnes, where she passed away after suffering from delirious fevers. Before her death, she told her sisters that her soul would not be able to rest in peace unless some part of her body remained in the beautiful mansion they lived in. However, when Anne passed away, her family did not respect her last wish, and she was buried in the local churchyard. Things took a strange turn when Anne's family started hearing sounds of Anne screaming and crying in different parts of the mansion. After a few days of hearing mysterious sounds and experiencing various supernatural phenomenon, Anne's family decided that it would be best to honour her last wish, so they excavated her grave, removed her skull, and placed it in the house. It is believed that since that day, the spirit of Anne has not bothered anyone. The mysterious screaming skull still rests in Burton Agnes Hall. The Green Children of Woolpit. During the reign of King Stephen within the 12th century England, one of the strangest stories of an ancient lost human civilization deep within the earth seemed to emerge from a small village in the middle of nowhere. According to records made in the 12th century, a report tells of a strange pair of abandoned children that had suddenly appeared in the small village of Woolpit, located within Suffolk, that led to many of the local residents questioning the nature of the children and their origins. The immediate cause for the questioning was due to the fact that the 2 children both had dark green skin, completely inhuman in nature, and spoke an unexplainable language that none had ever heard before. According to the 12th century documents that detailed the fate of the children were recorded to have been spotted by a group of villagers out in a nearby field, located alongside a wolf pit that had been dug to get rid of the wolves in the area, as the villagers had been working on that year's harvest. The villagers all noted that the children had unexplainable green skin, spoke a strange unknown language, and wore clothing that was completely unfamiliar to anything any of the villagers had ever seen before, though the exact description of the children's clothing is unknown. Fearing that the children were orphans or had come from a land that had recently been attacked, the villagers brought the children to the home of a man named Richard de Calnay, of whom accepted to adopt the children as their foster parent. Richard de Calnay, however, noted that the children refused to eat any kind of food offered to them as it was unfamiliar to them as food. It was due to this that the 2 siblings became malnourished and terribly sick. It was not until de Calnay offered the children a form of raw broad beans that the children started eating. Unfortunately for the boy, however, he would pass away shortly after. The girl would go on to recover and eventually lose her green colour as she got on a far more natural diet. Over the years, she learned English and began to tell the villagers where she and her brother had come from. According to the girl, she and her brother came from a place known as St. Martin's Land that was always in twilight and never had any stars or a sun in the sky. This led many of the villagers to believe that the siblings came from some underground lost civilization, as she told that she only came to the village after getting lost in a cave with her brother and finding a way out into the village of Woolpit. The Yatton Demonic George Lucans. Seen as one of the oldest documented demonic possessions in the modern day, the exorcism of George Lucans would go on to cause a tremendous controversy across England back in the late 1700s due to its frightening and completely unexplained nature. In the year 1788, a tailor by the name of George Lucans, later dubbed the Yatton Demonic, is believed to have become possessed by a demonic entity at the age of 44 for reasons not entirely known. According to a woman known as Mrs. Sarah Barber, she claims that as she was travelling through the village of Yatton Mendip, she had come across a man that suffered from an unknown condition in which the man would sing and scream in various pitches and sounds that did not sound like anything a normal man could have ever produced, and would often declare that doctors and science could never fix him from his ailment. Mrs. Sarah Barber, fearing for the man's soul, immediately wrote a letter to the Reverend John Easterbrook, an Anglican vicar of the Holy Cross Church, about the man in the hopes that something could be done to assist him. Among her claims, Sarah Barber wrote that she had known the man when she had formerly resided in Yatton, and attested that the man, known as George Lucans, had an extraordinarily good character and had attended every service of worship for most of his life. George Lucans claimed that the beginning of his demonic possession began when he had been acting in a Christmas pageant when suddenly he felt a slap from an invisible hand that knocked him down at the age of 26. Shortly after that moment, he had visited Dr. Smith, a renowned surgeon of Ryton, of whom was unable to help Lucans in his ailments. After a 20-week stay, with a number of physicians trying to help him, George Lucans was deemed incurable by the field of science and medicine and was forced to leave the hospital. It was during this 20-week stay, however, that George Lucans admitted that he had been possessed by 7 demons and that he believed only 7 clergymen could free his soul, though would not receive help for 18 years. Reverend Joseph Easterbrook, alongside 7 clergymen, took George Lucans to the vestry at the Holy Cross Church and began their exorcism, which included songs, prayer, and casting the demons back to hell. Although no supernatural evidence was seen, after the exorcism took place, George Lucans was able to sing praises once again, and demonstrated no further symptoms of his demonic possession. Many of the clergymen wrote that they believed skeptics would doubt their claims of battling the demons. However, they wrote their accounts regardless, which were later published in the Gentleman's Magazine and the Historical Chronicle. Many would go on to criticize the event, claiming George Lucans was suffering from nothing more than epilepsy. However, no symptoms of mental illness ever returned, nor did any of his ailments following the exorcism for the rest of his natural life.